but maybe it will come 5 words later or 2 words earlier, depending. Yeah, so it's variable. Yeah. All right. Okay, so excellent. So now, if we understood the way the self-attention works for the encoder, it's exactly the same for the decoder, except that at training time, when you are at evaluation time or inference time, you don't have the future words anyway. So you're obliged to work with only the word you're creating as it goes, right? At training time, what they do is they mask, every time you're evaluating the next word, of course they mask everything that goes after, so that way you simulate the actual determination of words. So that's fairly straightforward. And for the encoder-decoder mechanism, it is slightly different, meaning that in that case it's not self-attention anymore. The query comes from the previous layer of the decoder. So basically, where do I stand? How many words have I decoded so far? It's not as simple as that, because as you have several layers, you start decoding first layer, then you have an output, then this output comes back and you input it in the second layer of the decoder and so on and so forth. But basically, the query is the kind of the status of the translation at this stage. And the keys and the values are the end product of the encoder, but of the final stack, the final layer of the encoder. So this doesn't change once it is being settled. So it's the same idea. You take the query, look at your reference point, and try to see what's as the most interest, as the most relevant to make a translation. Okay. All right. So there are other components of the architecture which I mentioned. After every attention or combined attention, they have a feed-forward network, which is small. I think it's one hidden layer only. Every combination of these is actually one layer. And the encoder and decoder have each 6 layers. So also it's interesting because an LSTM, when you think of an LSTM, trying to understand one thing after the other, it really makes sense. You don't really see why you would need to stack LSTMs. Because you feel, okay, well, it gathers information, it should be good enough, right? In reality, for instance, in the encoder-decoder first experiment 2015, they remarked that the best results were given for 4 layers of LSTMs. Because you might argue that it goes in sequence, it gathers information about the sequence as it goes, but if you do it again, and again and again, it becomes a richer or more complex interpretation every time. So I'm guessing that's the same kind of idea here, that even though it doesn't totally make sense, in reality it gets richer and richer and richer every stage. When I read the paper, there were a few things which I found a bit challenging. I think that's also what made the paper interesting, was like the lots of elements they build onto. So some of them like layer normalization, which is like batch normalization only on a single layer, which is more suitable for recurrent network. The scale dot product, the multi-head discussed. But there are other stuff which myself I wasn't too comfortable with, and I just commented briefly on them just to help with having the double vision of the paper. So the residual connection. Is everybody familiar with like a residual connection? Is it worth discussing or? Well, residual connection. One idea that we could have is that when you have any neural network that works like reasonably well, you would think that if I had a layer, it would work even better, right? Because it will be more powerful. In reality, there is a limit. When you add a layer at some point, it doesn't work. And you think it's not normal, because if that layer was just an identity layer, if it was just transparent, it would work as well as the original model, right? So why not? In reality, the intuition is that solvers, the optimizers, have difficulties to recreate identity, to map identity, in fact. It seems to be to be difficult. And the intuition is that if we could have this identity by default, it would be better. So the idea of residual connection is actually quite simple. You have here your layer or layers, and they calculate, your thing, and you add here the identity. So which means that what gets out of it is the identity plus the amount of your layer. So if you want to have the identity, this has only to be 0, and if you have 0 here, boom, you have the identity mechanically. And it's much easier for a model to learn 0 and to learn identity. So that's basically the intuition. So that's what they call a residual connection. I wasn't fully familiar with it, but that's, I think, essentially what it is. And for like very deep networks like ResNet, when we have like thousands of layers, for instance, they massively use these residual connections. That's the only way it works apparently. Okay, linked embeddings. I think that was actually a good one. You realize here that when the model has this dimension, here you have a matrix, which on one side is the D model, and on the other side, the softmax has the dimension of the vocabulary. So it has the size of an embedding layer. And when you look into it, apparently, it is very similar to an embedding layer because vectors who have to be similar here have to be similar there as well. So a paper has found that if you tie these two, and specifically if you say that the input embedding must be equal at the output embedding times the square of 512, if you do that, you get actually better results with less parameters because these things are tied. Interesting stuff. And also, even more intriguing, you can link these two, which I didn't really understand at the beginning because this is, for instance, an embedding in French, and this is an embedding in English. So how can you embed different languages in the same thing? In fact, it works with something which I think is very interesting in itself, which is the decomposition of words in subwords. Something called byte pair encoding. All subject in itself, but in that case, you manage to get subwords, and these subwords can be common between them. So I think that was an interesting, the linked embedding is an interesting feature of the paper. What else? Oh yeah, the positional encoding. They give you equations, and they say that the reason why they do that is because a fixed translation is a linear transformation, which is actually true, but I don't see when you add it to the word why it's helpful. And their equation with sinuses and cosines and sines and cosines doesn't seem very clear to me. I just tried to understand what it meant in a nutshell, just for it. If this is a rotation matrix in the 2 dimensions, right? This is a basic theta, which has, actually an arbitrary theta, which is not a multiple of pi. If you have this vector, which is 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, and this matrix, which is the block diagonal matrix of rotations, of harmonic powers of this basic theta, the position, the vector you add for positional encoding is this, for the n position, is the rotation, or the multiple rotation times n, times this equation. Why is it clever? Any help is actually welcome. So.